I opened my eyes to find Janet, my sister-in-law, lying next to me, naked. The events of the previous night were a blur. My wife, Mabel, exposed at the drive-in theater with another man. Her betrayal broadcasted to the entire town. Chaos erupted, fists flew, and in the chaos, I was drugged. Janet insists she's on my side, but her motives are suspect. There's talk of hidden cameras, blackmail, and a twisted plan to ruin lives. Now, I must navigate through layers of lies and uncover the truth. My life has spiraled into chaos, and this is how it all started. I looked around the room but couldn't see anything because it was too dark. Even though I couldn't see, I felt something wonderful that made me almost forget my headache. As I turned my head to the left, I caught a faint, musky scent of an aroused woman. I felt like my head would explode, but I forced myself to feel it. Then I realized I was touching someone's soft butt, which was too small to be mammals. "Who?" I began, but the pain in my head stopped me. "Just relax, baby," she said. I recognized the voice immediately. That sexy voice, rough from smoking, could only belong to one woman in town. Things got worse for me. I tried, but I couldn't remember anything from the last 24 hours or why my wife's sister would be in bed with me. "Janet, this is nice, but can you stop?" Suddenly, light pierced the darkness, causing another explosion in my sensitive head. "Oops, I probably shouldn't have done that," she said quietly. "But you're wondering what's going on, aren't you?" "Yes," I said. "That's one of the questions in my head." "So you don't remember anything from last night?" she asked. "Not at all," I said. "From the way my head feels, I'm sure alcohol played a big part." "You deserve to let loose, honey," she said. "Actually, we're going to make sure we go crazy every now and then." "What do you mean, we?" I asked. "Mabel is going to kill me." "Mabel's gone, darling. Don't you remember that?" she asked. "Did someone give me tequila?" I asked. "When I drink tequila, I lose my memory and do stupid things. Please tell me I didn't have more than 1 or 2 shots." She shook her head. Watching her beautiful face move made my stomach spin. I jumped out of bed and ran to the bathroom. I crashed into the wall where the bathroom should have been. I looked at Janet and she pointed to the door. I ran through it and turned left, seeing the toilet. The seat was soft and pink. I barely had time to lift it before vomiting. "Feeling better?" she asked. She helped me up and gave me mouthwash and a new toothbrush. It was blue, my favorite color. Janet never took her eyes off me and wrapped her arms around me while I brushed my teeth. Her breasts were larger and firmer than Mabel's. The fact that we were both naked seemed important. When I finished brushing, she turned me towards her and looked at me. "Let me check," she said. This offended me. Mabel, my wife, often said the same thing early in our marriage. I think their mother did it when they were young. Mabel expected me to smile and show my teeth, so I tried to smile at Janet. "Not like that, honey," she said. She came up and kissed me, pressing her naked body against mine and running her tongue over my mouth. The reaction was immediate. Despite the hangover, I was completely aroused. "So even after last night, you still want more?" she asked. "What?" "I really want answers," I said. "Okay, honey, get dressed. We need to go to the bank in an hour, but we can have coffee and eat while I explain everything." My name is Mabel Forrester. I walked along the road all night. Dogs chased me several times. My legs were cut and bleeding. Yesterday, I wore expensive high heels, but I discarded them hours ago. They were great for a night out, but useless for walking on country roads. Thank God it was finally light. I was still 4 or 5 miles from town and even further from home. If I even still had a home. If my sister decided, I probably didn't have it. I couldn't believe her. After everything I did for her, she still betrayed me. She was always jealous of me, but I didn't think she would stab me in the back. Whoever said blood is thicker than water never met Janet. Finally, lights appeared on the road behind me. A truck with 2 teenagers slowed down as they approached. I turned and saw it was the Miller boy with Sarah Winslow. There were other kids in the back, probably going to the lake for summer fun. I waved, but when they recognized me, they sped up and drove past. My legs hurt, my feet hurt, and I was hungry. I kept walking because I knew if I stopped, I wouldn't get up again. I thought about the kids' reaction when they recognized me. I knew it would be bad. Small towns are unforgiving in certain situations, but their response was worse than I expected. Had I really fallen so far that I was beyond forgiveness and mercy? Just 24 hours ago, I woke up in my big bed. I was the queen of these two small, rural Iowa towns that made up our community. I was a queen not because of anything I did, though I'd never admit it, but because of my husband. The funny thing was, he wasn't from here. He didn't grow up in Harrison or Delaval. He was here for me. I met David Forrester while visiting my parents, who lived in Chicago. They moved to be closer to better medical facilities. My mom had a condition that caused chronic pain, and there was a clinic in Chicago that specialized in it. Anyway, Dave followed me home to spend more time with me and never left. We got married and decided to stay here. That was 23 years ago. The towns of Harrison and Daleville each had their own mayors, sheriffs, and schools. The towns were founded by brothers who didn't get along. Though they competed, they now depended on each other due to the economy. My good guy from Chicago, Dave, came into my life. Both towns were small and rural. There were many things they both needed. That first weekend when Dave arrived, one of my friends couldn't get his tractor fixed. He searched all over town for help. Dave, with his mechanical engineering degree, suggested we take the tractor apart. He made a temporary part at a local shop that worked until the original part arrived. Once people knew about this, Dave was accepted by both towns. Usually, farmers had to call the nearest big city for help and pay a lot for travel and parts. Dave soon had his own thriving business that both towns needed. At first, he only fixed tractors and farm equipment. Then he expanded to appliances and electronics. Now, he even services computers. My sister decided to go to school to become a computer technician, and I begged Dave to hire her. If I had known what she was up to, I would have sent her to a big city as soon as she graduated. Janet was a miracle for my parents. They thought I would be their only child. Then when I was 15, my 45-year-old mom found out she was pregnant. When I met Dave, I was 21 and Janet was 6. Now I am 44 and Janet is 29. Janet always loved Dave. She practically grew up with him. For years, I thought she had a high school crush on him, but I never saw it for what it really was. Over the years, my love for Dave became routine. It wasn't that I didn't love him anymore. He just didn't excite me. Dave became as comfortable as an old pair of shoes. He looked like a local farm boy, shaggy and with a small belly. We were doing well financially, but you couldn't tell from how Dave lived. Sure, I drove a Mercedes E-Class, but Dave had an old 2005 Mustang. The body was fine, but the springs, shocks, and other parts were rusty. I think the car was like my husband, proud, powerful, and in need of an upgrade. As Dave and his business grew more important, so did I. I started wearing designer clothes and drove my Mercedes everywhere. Over time, it seemed like Dave and I switched personalities. I became a big city woman, and Dave, originally from Chicago, became a small-town boy. The community got tired of my big city ways and loved Dave even more. Dave was just like them. He gave loans to farmers who couldn't get them anywhere else. He also let them defer payments for repairs until after the harvest when they could pay. Another thing that upset me was the schools. The Unified School District decided to buy computers for labs at each school. There were about 50 computers in total. The county had to get quotes from 3 companies for maintenance. 2 companies were out of town. Their quotes were too expensive for the towns. A town meeting was held to discuss raising taxes for computer maintenance. I was shocked when Dave stood up and told the meeting, which included the mayors and city councils of both towns, that he would do it for free. He also offered to do upgrades for just the cost of the software. I couldn't believe he threw away that money. But that was Dave. He believed we had enough money to live comfortably, and that was enough. This only made him more popular in the city and led me to where I am today. I don't remember exactly when I first felt tired of Dave or missed him, but it happened. I started dressing better and spending more time away from home. I also started flirting more. At first, the guys in town flirted back, but after a while, they stopped. They just looked at me strangely. I told myself it was because they were from a small town and close-minded. But after yesterday's embarrassment, I realized I was wrong. And then there's Jeff. Jeffrey Rosberg, an attorney. He came into town like a breath of fresh air. He also had an E-Class. I found out last night that the car wasn't his. It belonged to his wife, whom he didn't tell me about. In fact, most of what Jeff told me during the 4 months we had sex wasn't true. Either way, Jeff responded to my flirting and took it to the next level. He always complimented me and told me how beautiful I was. The funny thing is, Jeff was supposed to date Janet. He went out with her a couple of times when he first came to town, but she didn't want to see him anymore. She just laughed every time his name came up. I think my little sister was smarter than me. It's a shame no one told me why she left him. Maybe then I wouldn't be walking alone on this rural road. It seemed like it was always about Dave. Ever since she met him, my sister compared every guy to my husband, and in her eyes, none of them measured up. I needed to get to town to find a way home. If needed, I would withdraw money from our account to get back. David Forrester. Are you dressed yet? Even though I felt awful, hearing Janet yell felt normal. Come here if you want coffee. Janet, please stop yelling, I said as I walked into her spotless kitchen. Janet stood by the coffee maker, completely naked. She turned around and kissed me again, pressing her body against mine. Shouldn't you wear something? I asked. No, I want you to remember me like this. She smiled, then kissed me again. Why do you keep doing this? I asked. Because I don't know how this will end, she said. Just in case things don't go well, I want to give it my all. She smiled at me. What's the last thing you remember before waking up? She asked. Think carefully. We sat at her kitchen table and she held my hand. I got a call last night to look at the big projectors they use at the drive-in theater. They were having trouble getting the video feed from the wireless cameras to the screen. It turned out to be a software issue, so I started working on it. They wanted to use the cameras between films at a double showing, I said. Now it was all coming back. She saw that I was remembering and squeezed my hand. I needed to test the system, so I sent a couple of their guys to film some stuff. You know, funny stuff like couples kissing in cars. They showed that between movies. It was always a hit. I was going to show it on the monitors in the booth, but I mixed up the channels and broadcast it on the big screen. So everyone saw your sister, my wife, letting that guy touch her breasts. I couldn't continue and almost cried. Janet stroked my hand. Do you remember anything after that? She asked. I ran to his car, pulled him out, and punched him. I only hit him once, but he went down hard. After that, a lot of people showed up. You were there, Janet. I was shocked. Mrs. Daniels, an old lady from the library, asked if I hit him in the groin. I shook my head, so she did it. Janet winced but then smiled, remembering it. What happened after that? She asked. The sheriff came and tried to wake Jeff up. Jeff said he wanted to file a battery report against me for hitting him and maybe hitting him in the groin. 5 or 6 people said Jeff was drunk and fell, hitting his mouth on the car. The sheriff took their word and gave Jeff a ticket for public drunkenness and DUI. Then he gave Jeff a ticket for filing a false report. I remember Jeff yelling he was being framed. The sheriff took him and Mabel, but they didn't go to jail. They went to the theater. You and I were there too. The judge was there, Janet. How did he know? I'll tell you later, honey. Continue, she smiled. The judge looked at Mabel and shook his head. He made her sign some papers, even though she kept saying it was a mistake. He said yes, it was, but the town protects its own. Janet nodded. Then they took them outside. I don't remember what happened next. I remember sitting with the judge, the sheriff, the mayor, and others. We were drinking and having fun. There were a few women, too. I remember the smell of barbecue. Then I woke up with you. Okay, let me fill in some blanks, she said. This all started about a week ago, but really it began much earlier. I could tell she was about to say something painful because she took my coffee and led us to the living room. We sat on her couch. I sat up straight, afraid that any leaning would make my aching head worse. Janet sat close to me, throwing her legs over my lap and holding my hands. Comfortable? She asked. I nodded and she looked at her watch. It was almost 9. There was no chance of reaching the bank in 12 minutes. I didn't care because I didn't know why we needed to go to the bank. Okay, ever since I knew what boys were, I've had a crush on you. What you don't know is that it wasn't a high school crush. Over the years, Mabel and I had a lot of fights over you. The last one was just a week ago. We'll get to that later. I've had boyfriends because I'm human, but none of them were you. She smiled and kissed my hand. About 6 weeks ago, I started dating Jeff Rosberg. We went out a couple of times, but as usual, he wasn't you. I didn't get rid of guys just because they weren't you, but I found him creepy. He seemed like a player, and I wasn't going to be one of his conquests. Then when I looked him up online, it got more interesting. He's probably one of the biggest liars ever. The car he drives isn't his. It's his wife's car. The firm he works for isn't his. He's not a lawyer. He's a paralegal. He just files court papers for the lawyers at the firm. The firm belongs to his wife's father. His last name isn't even Rosberg. That's his wife's family name. They let him take it when he married her. So I left him. She smiled at me again. I started enjoying her company. After we broke up, people started saying we slept together, which wasn't true. I didn't care as long as he didn't say it to my face. But then people started asking weird questions like, "Have you ever slept with your sister?" It turned out he was telling people he slept with Mabel. I thought it was nonsense. Then last week I saw them behind a restaurant on 4th Street. He had his hand under her skirt and she just stood there. So I hit him and asked how she could be so stupid. Janet got emotional, so I gave her a hug. She groaned a little. Anyway, she looked at me blankly with wide eyes. Then she told me that I don't understand, that you're always at work and she's bored. She needed to have fun sometimes and said I'd understand when I grew up. Jeff got angry when she called him fun. She said she didn't mean that he was fun, but that he had more in common with her than you ever had. She was tired of you giving away business. She talked about how you could earn more money and live in a bigger house. You both could be much richer. Janet stood up and went to the phone. She pointed at me as if to say, "Wait, we'll finish this in a minute." She dialed a number and waited. Then she started talking to someone. I heard her mention my name a few times and told them I was fine. Then she held the phone to my ear. "Hello," I said. "Hi, Dave. I'm sorry for your loss, but in the end, you'll be in a better place and probably happier too. I just spoke with Janet, and I need you to confirm the temporary changes in your personal accounts." "Okay," I said. "Are you really allowing all your personal accounts and access to these accounts to be temporarily blocked?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "But what about my business accounts? I still want my people to order supplies and buy things. None of your business accounts will be affected," she said. "Okay, thanks," I said, and handed the phone back to Janet. Janet talked for a few more minutes. I heard her laugh a couple of times and asked the woman to call her if anything happened. Then she turned to me. She took my hand and led me back to her couch. "Lie down, Dave," she said. I lay down and she took off my shoes. Then she lay next to me on her big soft couch. She moved closer until we spooned and began her story again. "She begged me not to tell you that I saw them together," Janet said. But then Jeff started talking. He told her it didn't matter because you would find out sooner or later when she filed for divorce. Then I saw red. My sister thought Jeff was a rich lawyer, but like I told you, he doesn't have anything. He saw this as a chance to hook up with a dumb woman and make you support them after the divorce. I was shocked by what Janet said, but I loved her, I said. Janet snuggled closer. "I know you loved her, honey, but you can and must forget her." "I'm convinced of that," she said. Anyway, I went to the judge and told him everything. We drew up the divorce papers. The problem was we needed a reason for her to sign them. Divorce laws are written to protect women's interests, even when they lie and cheat like my sister. So we decided to offer her a fair settlement, either a lump sum or monthly payments, and get her to sign. We needed leverage to make her sign. Believe it or not, the incident at the drive-in theater was an accident. We didn't plan it, but people in town knew about Mabel and Jeff and took photos as evidence for us. Our plan was to confront Mabel with the evidence and force her to sign the papers. Then we would make her write you a goodbye letter and leave town. After seeing her on the big screen in front of both towns with Jeff, we had an even stronger case. The judge and sheriff took Jeff to jail last night. His wife and her family posted bail for him and dragged him home. According to Bonnie from the bank, he will soon be divorced and lose everything. They released Mabel outside the theater. Since Jeff's car was impounded, she had to walk home, which is almost 30 miles. I said, "Let him get what he deserves." Janet chuckled. "Honey, you were in shock. Seeing the woman you love on that giant screen would do it. The judge decided the best thing was to take you out of yourself and get you drunk. That's what they did." The sheriff remembered how his brother got over his divorce by being with another woman in a cheap bar. "I couldn't let that happen. So as soon as you got drunk, I took charge." I looked at Janet and wondered why she did all this. "I don't usually drink much," I said. "In college, I learned I have a low tolerance for alcohol. Tequila is the worst." "Darling," she said, "you must have been in bad shape because you not only finished the whole bottle, you ate the worm." I didn't know what to say, so I looked away. "Then I brought you home. she said. "I brought you to my house because it's comfortable here and it was closer. Do you remember the rest?" She looked at me, raising an eyebrow and smiling. "No," I said. "Did I act like a fool when I was drunk? You know, like trying to have sex with you?" I asked nervously. She snuggled closer. "No, you didn't try," she began, and I felt relieved. "I stripped you naked as soon as we walked in, and we had sex 3 times. The first time was right on the floor by the door. Then we went to my bedroom. It was nice. You told me you loved me and said if you weren't married, you'd marry me. Then we fell asleep. I woke up around 3 in the morning and went to the bathroom. I felt good when I came back to bed and snuggled up to you. It started again. I felt ashamed." "I'm sorry, Janet," I told her. "It must have been bad for you too. I really don't know what to say or do. I just feel numb. I can't believe Mabel cheated on me. I guess I have no idea. And to be honest, it's not my fault. I kind of let myself go. I guess I'm just like that rusty old Mustang out there. You can look at me and see I once was someone, but now I'm just a joke." I tried to sit up and move away, but she pressed closer to me. "Janet," I said, "I just wish you didn't have to be the one to put up with me last night." "Dave, are you out of your mind?" she barked, standing up and looking at me. "Sometimes you make me so mad," she said. "Why do you think I'm here? Do you know why you woke up here and not in some cheap brothel?" I shook my head. "You're confused because one stupid woman tried to hurt you." Janet was clearly angry. "David, do you think I can't handle one drunk man?" she exclaimed. "Besides, you're not violent or aggressive when drunk. Everything that happened last night was because people care about you. The sheriff and the judge love you. Everyone in these towns loves you. We couldn't do it without you. Your business serves both towns, and you charge much less than anyone else. You give credit to small farmers and business owners. You do things for schools. Dave, we all love you," she said. "We won't let anyone hurt you, including my stupid sister. About last night, you forget that I took your clothes off. Dave, I wanted to be with you. I always wanted this. So when the chance came, I took it." She said, "Both you and your Mustang just need a little attention. A little polish to help you reach your full potential. Then you'll both be something worth celebrating." She was silent for a while, just looking at me. "You have 60 days before you have to sign the final divorce papers or try to win back my sister. Why don't you go on a diet, start a workout program, and restore your car? It's enough to make Mabel want you back. Or maybe you'll get over her and want someone else." I don't know how far from town I was when the next truck arrived. It was an old truck, probably delivering parts or materials. The driver looked at me and asked where I was going. "I just need to get to town," I told him. "How old are you?" he asked. I think my vanity made me think he was wondering if I was under 18. But the reality was different. "I'm 35, I told him, subtracting about 10 years from my actual age. "Your dress is older than you," he said sharply, "but it's a good starting point. Remember that old saying from the 80s about giving rides to hitchhikers?" "No," I said, puzzled. "It was on all the bumper stickers," he said. "I still don't remember," I said. "Gasoline, grass, or," he hinted. I said, remembering, "I don't have money for gas because I'm going to the bank in town. I've never smoked marijuana, so I don't have that either. And I don't see how we can," I began. I was sure the driver wouldn't leave me stranded miles from town. He stuck his head back into the cabin and started the engine, driving away. "Wait!" I screamed. I couldn't take another step. He helped me into the truck bed. He then took off my dress and had sex with me. I was surprised and numb. It wasn't love-making, it was... I didn't even know what to call it. Dave was always gentle and took his time. I haven't actually had sex with Jeff yet. We were going to last night before we got caught, but I wasn't going to until he asked me to marry him. Either way, the truck driver was just rough. I wanted to scream for him to stop, but if I did, he would throw me out of the truck, and I would have to walk the rest of the way into town. Any challenge was better than this. I just let him use my body while my mind tried to plan my next move. As soon as I get into town, I'll withdraw money from the bank and call Dave and Jeff. I couldn't wait 60 days to talk to my husband. The money they gave me wasn't enough to live on. I wasn't sure I wanted a divorce. And Jeff, I liked that he was in better shape than Dave, and that he wore flashy clothes and drove a car like mine, but I wasn't sure I wanted him. He was exactly what I told my silly little sister. He was entertainment. Sure, Dave was boring, but when things go wrong, Dave is the type of man who will be there for me. I didn't know about Jeff. And even though he was out of shape, Dave was trying to protect me. I couldn't believe it when I saw him pull Jeff, who was bigger, out of the car and beat him up because of me. So I needed to get to the bank and withdraw some money so I could rent a car or pay someone to drive me home. I'll talk to Dave there and find out what our situation is. If we can get this sorted out, the judge's order and the preliminary divorce agreement I signed last night won't mean anything. After the truck stopped, he even dared to reach out to kiss me. "Maybe you'll let me in again later," he asked. "Just drive the truck," I replied sharply. He was right about letting him again. I didn't get anything out of it. I couldn't believe it when we arrived at the bank. We only drove for about 10 minutes. He had me for about an hour and a half for a 10-minute ride. I got off the truck and showed him the fact. As I sat down on the bench in front of the bank, I was so tired that I fell asleep almost instantly. Even my bed at home didn't feel as comfortable as the bare wood bench. I woke up a couple of times before the bank opened. The first time was when I heard a rooster at dawn. I knew there were still a few hours before the bank opened at 9 in the morning. I walked up to the diner and asked the waitress if I could have breakfast if I promised to come back and pay for it later when the bank opened. She looked at me as if I were an insect crawling out from under a stone. "Hell no," she snorted. "No money, no food." I knew she wasn't the owner of the restaurant, so I asked her who the boss was. She pointed to the guy behind the counter. I walked up to him and slammed my hand on the plate in front of him. "Do you know who I am?" I asked him. "Just a woman who slept in her dress," he said. "Do you know my name?" I shouted at him. Everyone in the diner looked at us. "Mabel, not only do I know your name, I know the size of your saggy breasts and how you like to be touched and pinched. I know a lot of things about you that I don't understand. What do you want?" He spoke quietly, so it did not arouse interest among his clients. The tone of his voice made it clear to me that not only did he know about last night, but he also had no intention of cutting me any slack. I turned and walked away, keeping my dignity. On my way past the back of the restaurant, I saw a guy knock on the door. The door opened and the cook gave him a bag of food. I approached him and asked if I could have some of this food. "Show me your breasts," he muttered. I looked around and made sure no one could see us. Then I leaned forward and pulled down the front of my dress. He reached out and roughly grabbed my left breast. "They're kind of flat and saggy," he said. He turned my back to him and grabbed my butt. "Hey, where's my food?" I asked. "I am starving." "What food?" he asked, clutching his bag tighter. "You said if I showed you my breasts, you'd give me some of your food," I reminded him. "No," he said. "That's what you heard. You came up and asked if you could have some of my food. I didn't say you could or that I would share with you. I just asked you to show me your breasts. There was no food deal. Plus, all you have to do is walk up to the door and knock. This food is all the leftovers they can't sell. That's what I love about this town. They give it away because they can't sell it. You let everyone who asks see your breasts and touch your butt." I left him and went to knock on the door. The young man who opened it almost died from shock. He quickly closed the door in my face. I returned to the bank and sat down on my bench again. A few minutes later, I fell asleep again. An hour or so later, I woke up when I thought several large drops of rain fell on me. I thought I was going to get wet, but luckily it stopped. The next time I woke up, it was bright and sunny outside, and the bank was about to open. I wondered why none of the bank employees woke me up when they came inside. Dave did a lot of business with this bank. They couldn't afford to break their relationship with me. Several children pointed at me and laughed. I looked angrily at their mother, who took them away, and she also smiled. I knew my dress was wrinkled, but that was no reason to be rude. Sally Anderson, who worked at the bank, saw me when I walked in and smiled, looking away. I realized she was also going to start laughing at me. I stood in line with the cashiers. The man at the end of the line looked at me as if he was terrified. He started coughing and quickly went and sat down at the table. The bank provided for filling out forms or writing checks. The woman in line in front of me now motioned for me to move forward. She tried not to laugh as she dialed a number on her cell phone. She stayed about 5 feet away from me in line. Mary Dickinson came over and took me out of the line, leading me to her office. Mary and I went to school together, and she used to handle all our bills. "Hi, Mary," I said. "I'm glad you came for me. I don't have a wallet, and I need money." "Oh, it doesn't matter," she smiled. "Finally, I thought I had found someone in this small town who respected me the way I deserved. I noticed Mary dialing a number and trying not to laugh. "What's so funny about my wrinkled dress?" I asked. "It's not the dress," Mary said, laughing. She took out a mirror from one of her tables. She handed it to me, and I looked at myself. My makeup was a mess. My eyeliner was smeared down my face, making me look like a raccoon. My expensive lip gloss was all over my face, probably from when the truck driver kissed me. I looked like a mix between a bad movie character and a clown. But what made everyone laugh the most were the 2 big drops of bird poop in my hair. I thought they were raindrops, but they were actually from pigeons. "So you said it doesn't matter that I don't have my wallet or ID," I said, trying to stay dignified. "I think $200 will be enough." "When I said it didn't matter," Mary began, "I meant it doesn't matter whether you have a wallet or not because I can't give you money." "What do you mean?" I exclaimed, standing up and leaning toward her, breathing heavily. Mary stayed calm. "Mabel, you think you're high society with your fancy clothes and car, but you're just as country as I am. We went to school together, played together, and grew up in the same small town. So, sit down and let me explain." I sat back down and she continued. "The accounts you have access to are temporarily frozen." "I don't understand," I snapped. "This has never happened before. Why is my money frozen? Do you know how much money I have in this bank?" "Yes, I know," she said sweetly. "Not a cent. All the money in those accounts, including the credit cards you don't have with you, belongs to your husband. Or soon-to-be ex-husband." "I don't understand," I snapped. "Dave and I are still married until the final papers are signed. I'll get a great lawyer, and in 60 days, no papers will be signed. Dave and I will be together again, and you'll all eat crow." Mary started laughing. "What's so funny?" I barked. "You should have taken out the last hour. Then we would have eaten you." She laughed. "I was told if you came in, I should offer you $0 and give you a phone number. Here is $0. She gave me an empty envelope and handed me the phone. "Dave, I'm so sorry," I said into the phone. "No, you're not, Mabel. You chose your path. Now follow it. Dave can't answer the phone right now." I recognized the voice. It was my sister, Janet. "Janet, you can't take my husband," I screamed. "Why not?" "Mabel," she asked. "He will make someone in this city a happy wife. Why not me?" "Because you're my sister." "That must mean something. That means I called Mom and Dad in Chicago. I didn't tell them what you did to the man who loved you and supported you for over 20 years. The same man who pays for Mom's treatments. I decided I'd let you tell them." "Janet, what are you talking about?" "Dave needs some time away from you to clear his head," she said. "So you will go to Chicago for 2 months. You can return in 60 days for a court hearing. You will also have 1 meeting with Dave during that time. Until then, leave him alone. He's suffering enough as it is. I left you a bus ticket at the station and a suitcase with some of your clothes. I even left you $20 for food during the trip. Stay with Mom and Dad for a couple of months and think about what you've done. Maybe when you return, he'll be ready to talk. Or maybe you can contact Jeff in the meantime." "Thank you, Janet," I said. "I wish I could talk to Dave and resolve this, but at least you gave me a chance." "Don't thank me," she said coldly. "I will try my best to take him from you." That night, Janet made me a salad for dinner, lettuce, tomatoes, and celery from her garden with some turkey for protein. "Great snack," I said. "What else will we have?" "That was dinner," she said. "You are on a diet." After dinner, she washed the dishes and made me rinse and dry them. Even though I repair every appliance in town and have contracts with major manufacturers, Janet didn't have a dishwasher. "I don't want one," she said when I mentioned it. Afterward, we sat on the porch swing and watched the stars. When it got cooler, she wrapped a blanket around us and we talked. She made me talk about everything I felt. It felt good to talk it out. She also told me many things I never knew about her. I watched her grow up, but there are things we don't know about the people we love. Janet managed my computer repair department, but she didn't have her own computer at home. She had an iPad for email and internet, but preferred simplicity. She was a country girl, educated in the city. Mabel, on the other hand, wanted all the modern conveniences. She only kept things until a new model came out. The more complex a thing was, the more she valued it. Mabel never worked a day in her life. She thought she belonged in the fast-paced city and found life here boring. Maybe staying in Chicago was the best decision for her. When it was time for bed, I took the blanket from the porch and headed to the couch. "What are you doing?" asked Janet. "I'm going to bed," I said. "Our bedroom is upstairs," she said sharply. "Janet, I've already taken too much advantage of your hospitality," I began. "God, you're such an idiot," she chuckled. "Okay, last night we slept together. True, you were drunk, but I wasn't. You've already made love to me more than once. If you don't want to have sex with me, that's fine, but why should I suffer?" "What do you mean by suffering?" I asked. "Last night, for the first time, I got what my sister had for half her life. I fell asleep holding someone who cared about me. I was so happy that the first thing I thought about this morning was you. I know you didn't mean what you said last night, and I don't demand it from you. But I really would like you to sleep next to me, at least for a few more nights. There's no need for me to be alone in my little house while you wander alone in that supermarket you and Mabel called home." She looked at me and smiled. "I won't bite you unless you ask. I won't pressure you. Let's just be friends. I promise." I followed her upstairs, remembering what her body looked like without clothes. As I laid down that night, listening to her breathing as she pressed against me, I tried to compare it to sleeping next to her sister. I don't know where I came from because when I woke up the next morning, she pulled me out of bed. "Come on, get up. It's time to get up," she said. "What?" I said. "What's for breakfast?" "Dirt," she smiled. "We're going for morning exercises. Breakfast will be only after we get rid of the belly." I got out of bed and she had already prepared sweatpants and a t-shirt for me. I got dressed while she smiled at me. "Don't forget your sneakers," she said mockingly. I bent down and put on my shoes. I noticed that she was wearing flip-flops. "How are you going to run in those?" I asked. "I'm not going to," she chuckled. "I'll train with you, but I don't need as much as you. My legs and butt are already in shape, so I'm good." We left the house. I complained all the way. It was barely light. "We're running to the diner for breakfast. You get a glass of fresh juice, 2 strips of bacon, half a slice of lightly buttered toast, and half a grapefruit," she said. "All?" I muttered. "That's not the worst part," she grinned. "It's 6 in the morning. Your breakfast will be waiting for you until 6:20. The diner is 2 miles away. If it takes you more than 20 minutes to get there, you'll be left without food." "What happens when I get there?" I asked. "Then you and I will have breakfast together. Then we will run back home, do our morning exercises, and then take a shower and go to work. You have a short day planned, after which we will return here to start doing that other thing." "What other thing?" I asked. "We'll talk about it when the time comes. Hurry up or you'll be left without breakfast," she smiled. I started to run. The 10-minute miles were pretty easy, so she had a good plan. Every week we would cut the time by a minute until I could follow it. This meant that every week I had to get 30 seconds faster per mile. This meant that by the end of the 4th week, I would have achieved the fastest speed I had ever run, 8 minutes per mile. I didn't know what would happen next, but now I just wanted my breakfast. So I ran. Every time I fell behind or tried to relax, Janet pulled ahead. Just seeing her attractive butt in those shorts made me want to run faster. When we arrived at the diner, Rose, the waitress, smiled at us and pointed to our table. She looked at the clock on the wall and we had 30 seconds left before we would be hungry. Janet told me how proud she was of me. She kicked off her flip-flops under the table and ran her bare feet up and down my sweaty feet. She seemed to enjoy touching me every chance she got. It was so different from Mabel, who only touched me when we had sex. I noticed how all the men in the diner were looking at Janet in her gym clothes. The strange thing about all of this was that when Mabel got dressed, she did it so that people would notice her, and she had to walk around and make sure that everyone saw her. She then had to point out to me that people were looking at her. Somehow, Janet made it clear to me that only my opinion was important to her. We returned home much more slowly. When we arrived, I was about to collapse. She looked at me and said, "Oh no, cowboy, we're not done yet. Squats and push-ups. We need to get our upper body in shape too." Janet's concept of squats was strange. I lay down on the floor and bent my knees. She sat on top of my legs, holding my legs for leverage. Every time I got up, she kissed me. The first time I only did 10, then I fell. "Come on, one more," she said affectionately. "I'll make it worthwhile." I looked at her. "I can't, Janet," I said. "Come on," she said. "You'll like it." I began to pull myself up, tensing my stomach all the way. I was about to give up until I looked at Janet and noticed that she had taken off her shirt. My eyes widened and I stretched myself all the way, only to ask her why she did it. When I was almost at the top, she grabbed me and pulled me the rest of the way. "I knew you could do it," she said. Then she kissed me. But this kiss was not just a peck like all the others. She stuck her tongue in my mouth and pressed me to her chest. "You can do whatever you want, Dave," she said. "I really believe in you." I felt warmth throughout my body. "Push-ups," she said. "I need 10. Janet's push-ups also included kissing. I got into a push-up position over her, and every time I lowered my body down, our lips would touch. Then I pushed up again. As out of shape as I was, I could only do 6, but she was still proud of me. "Wait until you can do 20, she said. I was even more exhausted. "But you didn't play sports." "I said I warmed up watching you, darling." She chuckled. Then I went up to the bathroom to take a shower. I was about to wash up when the shower door opened and Janet walked in. "Relax. You don't have to do anything you don't want to," she said. "I'm just saving time and water." After our shower, we headed to work. For the past few years, I held morning meetings with all employees. This way, we knew what needed to be done and whether any areas like farm equipment repair, household appliances, or computers needed more help or had people available to assist others. I usually took care of unusual tasks, and I had a few clients who wanted me to handle their renovations personally. After the meeting, I thanked everyone for covering for me while I was gone the previous day. They were all supportive and told me I should rest more. I was about to choose my renovation project when I discovered it was already scheduled. My work was in the workshop downstairs. I went down, and before I could turn on the light, the door slammed, and I was pushed roughly against the wall. When I got off the bus in Chicago, I was furious. Janet had quite a sense of humor. None of the clothes she packed matched. In the bus station restroom, I opened my suitcase and tried to change out of my mint dress. I found a few pairs of casual pants perfect for riding the bus, but no tops that matched them. The tops she packed were meant to be worn with skirts or under other clothes. Another problem was that she hadn't packed any stockings, only socks, none of which matched. The same went for shoes. She gave me 6 shoes, 4 unmatched, and the other 2 were ridiculously high stiletto heels. Perfect for a cocktail party or theater premiere, but terrible for walking, so I ended up wearing loud yellow pants that were too tight and an orange and purple striped shirt. I wore them without stockings or socks and in shoes that made me look odd. My bus was leaving soon, so all I could do was quickly try to remove the bird poop from my hair. This meant I didn't have time to do my makeup. And Janet somehow forgot to pack the makeup, so I looked like a clown with smudged makeup and dried bird droppings in my hair. As I boarded the bus, guess what? No privacy. As soon as the bus started moving, an old man moved to sit next to me. "How much does sex cost?" he asked loudly. I was sure everyone on the bus heard him. My life couldn't get any worse. It was an 8-hour bus ride. The only window that didn't open was next to me. However, the bus seat was more comfortable than the bench, so I quickly fell asleep. I woke up to find the old man next to me groping my breasts. I hit him so hard he fell out of his seat. Then he started muttering that I was the only unfriendly woman he had ever met and too expensive. He also said my breasts were soft. He needed to learn to whisper because everyone on the bus heard him. When we stopped at the first station, the driver made everyone get off. I begged to stay and sleep, but he refused. He said we'd be at the station for 20 minutes and I could sit on the bench in front of the station. He promised to wake me if I fell asleep. That's what I did. After my recent adventure, I was exhausted and my legs hurt. I got off the bus, dragging my suitcase, and sat on a bench in front of the station. Of course, I fell asleep, and the bus driver woke me a few minutes later. He smiled when he woke me. "Did someone poop in my hair again?" I asked. "No," he smiled, pointing down. I noticed a small dog urinating on the bench leg, and it was pouring on me. I moved my leg, and he pointed to the sign next to me. When I first sat down, I thought it was the station name. I didn't read it because I only cared about getting to Chicago. The sign read, "Fresh Paint." I tried to stand up, but my clothes were stuck to the drying bench. The driver picked me up, tearing my shirt in the process. I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to get to Chicago and start planning how to get back to my life. The driver didn't let me board until he put newspapers on the seat to protect it from my clothes. Then we hit the road. When we arrived at the train station in Chicago, I stood up only to find newspapers stuck to my clothes. I got up and got off the bus. My mom and dad were waiting. I could tell by their faces they wondered what happened. My father walked toward me, then quickly backed away. "Mabel, you smell like cat piss," he said. "Actually, Dad, it's dog urine." "But that's a long story," I said. The people at the bus station smiled and laughed at my clothes, face, and the newspaper stuck to my back. My mom didn't say a word. Moms always know. My dad laughed and smiled, trying to keep the conversation going. We were all shocked when the old man I rode with came over and said to my dad, "Hey, buddy, if I were you, I'd find another girl. Her services are too expensive. Her breasts are too soft. She's mean and smells like cat urine. I think she might be sick. If you're desperate for a woman, there are plenty of others here. Let this one go." He walked away, leaving my dad with his mouth open. As soon as we got into the car, my dad asked me what the man was talking about. "Just a misunderstanding, Dad," I smiled. Then my mom took charge. "Mabel, what have you done?" she asked, looking at me like she could see through me. "Mom, how do you know I did something?" I squealed. "Mabel, if someone did something bad to you, you'd be the first to tell Dave about it, and he'd handle it. This man loves you. He wouldn't let anyone hurt you for anything. If Dave did something bad to you, you should have called your sister first and then us. Janet called us and told us to come pick you up at the station. When I asked her if Dave and she were okay, she said she is fine and Dave is in a lot of pain, but he'll be fine in the end. All of this suggests that you did something. So what did you do?" she insisted. Even my father looked at me. "Is it so bad that you can't fix it?" he asked. "I'm not sure I want to fix this," I said. "Dave is boring, so I found someone else." My dad braked so hard I almost flew through the windshield. "What?" he asked. He just looked at me like I was stupid. Over the next few days, I adjusted to life at my parents' house. They mentioned several times a day that they weren't too happy about me returning, even temporarily. Their house was small, with 3 rooms: their bedroom, a gym or exercise room, and a home theater and media room. I slept on the living room floor in a sleeping bag because they spent $1,100 on the couch, and Dad didn't want me to ruin it. On the 3rd day, I finally contacted Jeff. He answered the phone cautiously. "Hello," he said in a quiet voice. "Jeff, honey, it's me," I squealed. The line went silent. Then someone else answered the phone. "Who is this?" they asked. "This is Mabel Forrester," I said. "Oh, bitch," she responded sharply. "This is Jeffrey's wife, or maybe his ex-wife. I haven't decided yet whether to forgive him again. Did you know that Jeffrey is without a job, without a roof over his head, and without a car?" I was shocked. "What about the Mercedes E-Class?" I asked. "Jeffrey used my car while running errands for the court as my paralegal. He got into some trouble recently, and Delaval and my father fired him. If you want to support Jeffrey, he's yours. I'll pack up all his few belongings and you can come and pick them up." I hung up, realizing I had problems. I've been lying to myself these past few weeks. I was caught in a fantasy where I was the star of my own little world, and everyone else was just a supporting or bit player. I have now reached the scene where the heroine is put to the test. The question is, can I pass this test? 3 paths were laid out before me. The first and most reliable was to start an independent life. I am a strong woman and could get a job to be self-sufficient, or I could invent something or start my own business. The second choice was to find another man who would take care of me and meet my needs. After all, I was a beautiful and well-dressed woman with all the charms of any woman from a big city. How could it be difficult? The third option, and completely unacceptable, was to admit that I was wrong and ask Dave for forgiveness, begging him to take me back. I was confident that I could get Dave back with minimal effort. But the question is, did I really want him back? Of the 3 options, this would be the easiest for me. I assumed that all I had to do was go home, put on some nice underwear, give him some sex whenever he wanted for the first week or so, and then everything would go back to normal. I decided to use the third option as a backup plan in case the first 2 failed. I really liked the first option. So one night after my parents went to bed, I took out my notepad and picked up the newspaper. I started looking at job advertisements and suddenly realized I was in trouble. It was really hard to decide what jobs to apply for when I couldn't even remember what I studied in college. I needed to talk to Dave. He could remember this useless information. Damn, why do I need to remember this? I was married for over 20 years, and we got married just a few months after I left college, so I called home. The phone rang and no one answered. So I called his cell phone, and a woman answered on the third call. "Dave, honey, what did I study in college? Do I have a degree?" I asked. "Dave is no longer your dear, and he is busy," a woman's voice answered sharply. "Who is this?" I asked. "Why are you answering my husband's phone?" "God, Mabel, I know you're a little slow, but don't you recognize your own sister's voice?" she said. "Janet," I snapped, "don't you have anything better to do? David is more than capable of entertaining himself." "Goodbye, Mabel," she said. "Your major was in childhood development, but that was over 20 years ago. It's probably no longer relevant. And frankly, you'd be a terrible mother and an even worse teacher." Janet hung up on me. Childhood development. Why did I study for this? I thought about it for a while and finally remembered before I met Dave and started his business. I wanted to work with children. I was even planning on having children with Dave. He would be a great father. Why did I give up this dream? I thought about it even more and realized it was money. Once Dave's business took off and I started having everything I wanted, it seemed like looking good and being fashionable became even more important. If I got pregnant, it would ruin my figure. I would have become one of those country girls with wide hips. The seats in my class were simply not big enough for that. What about clothes? Most of the designers I liked didn't make clothes that large. So I took the pill. And though Dave had mentioned kids a couple of times over the years, we each had our own activities to keep us busy. Okay, I couldn't find a job. I thought, I'll have to do something better and start my own business. How hard can it be? Dave did it. And if he hadn't been so generous, we might have been mega rich. I just needed to figure out what type of business to start. The sky was the limit, so I thought long and hard about what I was good at and what I enjoyed doing. I was so calm while thinking that I noticed something. My parents were having sex just a few feet away from me in the next room. How dare they? They seemed to be having fun, although they tried to be quiet. Just the thought of my mother being with my father was enough to shut me up. I began to doubt my sanity. Finally, I could tell they were done. Thank goodness. Then I imagined them lying together in the dark, holding each other just as Dave and I had done. When did we give up on that? It used to make me feel so good and loved. I remembered when I started spending over $300 on my hair. I had to make sure my style was maintained, so I wore a scarf over it at night. I couldn't snuggle up with Dave because I needed a special pillow for my neck to protect my waves. In hindsight, it might not have been a good idea. Dave always thought I was beautiful no matter what I wore, but Jeffrey always criticized my clothes and appearance if they weren't perfect. Okay, enough about the past. What am I good at? I obviously have a passion for fashion. Maybe I can open my own clothing store and get into design later. This would be a great start. I made a list of everything I needed to open my own clothing store. The next morning at breakfast, while my father scowled at me over his coffee, I asked him point blank how much money we had. "What does we mean?" he asked. "I'm thinking about starting my own business and I need a lot of money, Dad," I said. He almost fell down laughing. Then he straightened up, looked at me, and started laughing again. My mom came in and asked what was funny. He told her about my plan to start a business. To my mom's credit, she didn't laugh but smiled, came over, and touched my forehead. "Seriously, Dad, how much money do we have?" I snapped. He became serious and said no. I was stunned. "We've put some money aside for the future," he said. "We wanted to do some things and see some places when we're older. We've also saved enough to give you and your sister some spare change in an emergency, but you can never predict the future." Mom came over and hugged him. "Mabel, your mom's health is costing us more than we could have imagined. When she was first diagnosed, she was in a lot of pain. I was willing to do whatever I could to stop her pain. Her treatment is expensive, but it's worth it. Looking at her today, you can hardly tell she's in discomfort, but it has used up almost all our savings. I didn't know what to do. I even thought about going back to work to get some money. Your husband just sent payments and told me not to go back to work, so your mom and I can spend our golden years together. He told us to let the young people work. We deserve a rest." After a few months, when my retirement checks started giving us a comfortable bank balance again, I called him and said we could pay for some of the treatments ourselves. He told us to use the money to take the trips we wanted or see the things we wanted to see. "So you have some money?" I asked. "Yes, but I'm doing what Dave advised. Your mom and I are going to see the Grand Canyon next month." I was angry. How dare he think about going to see some hole in the desert when I needed the money? "Dad," I said seriously, "isn't it true that if Dave hadn't paid for Mom's treatment, you wouldn't be going to the Grand Canyon?" "Probably," he said. "You never know what might happen." "Well, since the money came from Dave and me, it's technically my money and I want it," I said. "Mabel, you haven't lifted a finger since you married that man. That's what's wrong with you. He spoiled you to the point where you don't think you should even lift a finger. Dave gave us the money, so I'll call him and see what he thinks. If he says to give you the money, we will." I didn't see the problem. As soon as my business took off, I would pay them back. How long might it take? A couple of weeks? A month at worst? And the money would be returned. The Grand Canyon had been there for thousands of years, almost as old as my parents. It wasn't going anywhere. Dad went to the phone. He called Dave and started talking to him. He laughed, said something, and then told Dave to keep his head up. Then he hung up and came back to me. "Dave said the money for your mom's treatment wasn't dependent on your marriage. It wasn't a gift. It was just family helping each other. He said he will continue to help us, whether you stay married or not. He said your mom and I should enjoy the Grand Canyon and offered to pay for a helicopter tour for us. He said you should go to the bank for a loan to start your business like he did and like everyone else does." My father said, grinning at me. "Why didn't I think of that?" I cried. "For such a boring guy, Dave has some really good ideas." "Mabel, there are two more things we need to talk about," my father said. I just looked at him. "Yes, Dad." "What happened between you and Dave? He seems too upset for it to be nothing," he asked. "I already told you." "I thought I found someone better," I said. "There's one more thing. You should probably start paying us rent to live here," he said. "What?" I screamed. "How can you even think about charging your own daughter rent to sleep on the floor?" I wisely didn't finish my sentence. I just nodded and told him we'd talk about it when I got back from the bank. I borrowed a dress from my mom that didn't look too bad. I went to the bank and filled out a loan application. I had to wait over an hour to see the loan manager. He asked me the stupidest questions I've ever heard. Things like, do I have collateral? Do I have business management experience? He wanted to see my business plan and list of expenses. Was I going to rent or buy? Rent or buy what? I had no idea what he was talking about. I got up, apologized, and went home. I was roughly slammed against the wall in my workshop. I thought someone wanted to steal some tools and equipment. If I had stayed quiet and not caused problems, maybe they would have left. I felt the man's hand slide down my sides and reach behind me. They were clearly checking to see if I had a weapon. My heart was beating so fast that I thought it would fly out of my chest. I couldn't remember being so scared for a long time. The attacker reached in front of me and began to unzip my pants. I reached for the light switch on the wall and saw Janet's smiling face. "You scared the crap out of me," I shouted. "Well, you won't take care of your end of our deal," she shouted back. Janet was wearing overalls, the kind worn by mechanics and technicians. She had her long hair in a ponytail and wore a backward baseball cap. She also wore safety glasses, but the zipper of the jumpsuit stopped at her waist, and I could see two bare breasts threatening to burst out at any moment. "What do you mean I don't care about my goal?" I asked. "Last night you slept in bed with a healthy, naked woman who clearly wanted to cuddle with you, and you didn't do a damn thing," she said. "You said we didn't have to do anything," I said, reminding her. "Well, I lied," she said. "Did you enjoy sleeping in my bed last night?" I nodded my head. "I really did. It was like when Mabel and I were younger, only better. There's nothing better than snuggling with a warm body while you sleep, especially when that body moves and takes the shape of yours. You feel so loved. I think most people miss this more than sex when a marriage ends. Since Mabel became too fashionable for me, I've missed it." "Say something stupid," Janet said. "Yes, I liked it," I said. "I really felt special and cared for." "The word you're trying to avoid is love," she snapped. "I felt the same way." The problem is that at night, when you run your hands all over my body, it causes a reaction. As you can see, she said, turning around and spanking herself. Very healthy young woman. She squeezed her breasts as if she wanted me to come and inspect them. So if you're going to keep sleeping with me, it's not free. It will cost you, she said. I'll write you a check, I muttered. No nonsense. No money, she said. I want some of this. She rubbed the front of my pants and then stepped back and smiled. Forget it, she said. Anyway, you're almost ready to burst. It probably won't be a problem. She took my hand and we walked over to the computer. She scanned several photos of my car. We looked at the car from different angles and changed parts on it. We changed the wheels and tires. We changed the front grills. We added a dark back panel. We completely replaced the brake system. We changed the color. Then we started arguing. The argument started when she asked me if I wanted to install a supercharger or try something unusual, like a turbocharger. American muscle cars rarely use turbos. Even nitrous oxide injection systems were more common. In the end, we just decided to do the engine modifications as an afterthought. We found that we worked well together. We both fell in love with the chrome Helio-T's wheels at the same time. Janet wanted 20-inch wheels. I reminded her that these wheels were not lightweight, so the extra 2 inches in diameter would slow the car down. We ordered wheels with Hankook racing tires. We then found and ordered drilled and slotted brake rotors and pure white brake calipers to match the paint color we chose. We ordered chrome top and bottom grills and got on with the job. Then we approached the car and began to disassemble it. After removing the wheels, we realized that we would also have to redo the suspension. We spent a total of 4 hours on the car, and then Janet suggested we stop. We returned to her house, and she suggested that I change clothes. The funny thing was that even though we were both supposed to sleep in her room, she put all or almost all of my things in the guest room closet. It seems that women can share anything with a man except their closet. We showered together, of course, to wash off the oil and dirt from the car, and then Janet headed to her room. I quickly changed into casual pants and a shirt. I was sitting on the bed in the guest room, testing its springiness. When Janet entered, I was fascinated. First of all, she changed her clothes in just a few minutes. Mabel usually spent 2 hours getting ready to go to the store. And secondly, as good as she looked, Janet was beautiful. I always knew she was beautiful, but maybe because she was 15 years younger than Mabel, I always thought of her as a child. But at almost 30, she had become a real woman. She had beautiful round buttocks that fit perfectly in jeans. It wasn't a model's, but barely noticeable. That was a real country girl butt. Her waist was very slim, widening out to match her attractive breasts. They seemed to have a life of their own as they bounced under her shirt. Even with a bra, they moved enough to show they were real. "Where are we going?" I asked. "To the cinema," she said. "Don't worry, not the drive-in. We need to get you out so people can see that what my sister did didn't break you." So off we went to see the new Nicolas Cage film. Janet adored Nicolas Cage. As we left the theater, we walked down the street, holding hands, and discussed what we liked and didn't like about the movie. I never ran out of things to talk about with Janet. Mabel and I rarely spoke. I would start conversations about business or city events, but she wasn't interested. She talked about new clothes or vacation spots, which didn't interest me. Eventually, we just stopped talking. We had dinner at a diner and laughed the whole time. Then we went home, sat on the porch, and talked some more. Janet was open about many topics, but refused to take some things seriously. When I thanked her for spending time with me and helping me through what Mabel did, she just rolled her eyes and said, "Man." She was also unpredictable. While we were at the restaurant, a couple of people came up to express their regret about what happened between Mabel and me. I was surprised how much people in town cared. When the conversation turned to Janet and me, she got nervous. "Well, I have to help him feel better. We're family," Janet said. "He's not ready to date yet, Sally, so don't rush to take off your big undies too soon." The next morning after our run, Millie Tyler was waiting for us on Janet's porch. "Good morning, Janet," she said slowly. "Good morning, Dave." Janet went on the offensive. "Millie Tyler, it's too early for decent people to visit. Besides, Dave needs to do his morning exercises." "He looks perfectly healthy," Millie said, smiling at me. "I just came to tell him I'm sorry for how Mabel treated him and invite him over for dinner." She looked at me, and I noticed Millie's large breasts and the fact she wasn't wearing a bra. Dave, you need to be careful choosing someone to help you get over Mabel. You don't want to be in the same situation in 15 years. She was so direct that I didn't understand her hint, but Janet did. And it started. Janet went from sweet and caring to something completely different. Millie, get off my porch and never come here again. If Dave goes back to Mabel, you can visit him there, or he can come to you if he wants, but never come here again. I baked him this fresh strawberry pie, Millie smiled, handing me a plate of pie. Janet quickly snatched the pie and threw it down the driveway. He's on a diet. He doesn't need your pie, and he's allergic to strawberries, she snapped. Now get lost. Then she grabbed my hand and dragged me inside. Janet held my knees as I did crunches, but there was no kissing. When I did push-ups, she just counted. I wanted to get to 20 to see what I would get, but my arms hurt, and I only made it to 14. You don't care about me becoming a better person anymore? I asked. You want more time to stare at Millie's huge breasts? Of course not. They're too big. She'd probably strangle me in my sleep. So what size do you like? She asked. Well, Millie's are too big, and Mabel's were too small. Someone in the middle would be perfect. This made Janet smile again. Over the next few weeks, we spent almost all our time together. We got up together, sort of exercised together, went to work together, had lunch together, worked on my car together, ate dinner together, and talked and watched the evening sky together. During that month, I lost almost 9 kilograms. I looked much younger and in better shape than I had in a long time. In the 5th week, Janet suddenly suggested I get a haircut. She knew exactly what she wanted and told the hairdresser. Then we bought me a couple of new suits and a couple of dresses for Janet. She said we should go out, maybe to a nearby town, to celebrate my weight loss and the new me. We still had to wait for a couple of things to get done. We were almost done with the car, but were waiting on some parts. We decided to compromise. Janet wanted a boost, but I didn't like most power boosters because they can wear out your car's parts. However, Janet showed me an ad online for a hood intake system. It was a large pipe mounted on top of the engine that fed more air into the intake. The faster you go, the more extra air it pumps, like a supercharger or turbocharger, but without forced air. It was due to arrive in a few days, and we would install it and then go out to celebrate. But a lot changed that evening and the next morning. First of all, Janet and I often satisfied each other, but that night we just lay in bed as usual. We were holding each other, saying it was just for warmth or to feel cared for. But suddenly, she turned around and climbed on top of me. We made love energetically at first, then slowed down. We were both healthy and had sex several times a month, though not as often as she hinted she'd like, and certainly not as often as I wanted. But this time was different. Instead of her usual talk, she said things that felt much more personal. I remember her saying, "Make me yours, Dave." In my heart, I realized I wanted her to be mine. She whispered 3 words that changed everything. "Love you, Dave." Then she suddenly got up and left the bed. It was as if I saw something I shouldn't have seen. When I woke up the next morning, Janet was different. I tried to hug her as I had done so many times over the past 5 weeks, but she pulled away. "Dave, I'm not feeling well this morning. I don't want to infect you if I have something," she said. "Can you go for a run without me?" "Yes, but I can't have breakfast without you," I told her. "Dave, I don't think I can eat today. If I do, I'm not sure it will stay with me," she replied. "What about our big dinner and night out?" I asked. "Maybe we should postpone it." "No, darling, I wouldn't miss this for the world," she smiled. "See you later." I didn't notice anything unusual that day. She did show up at work and watched me work on the car. When we finished, she ran up and hugged me. That hug was the best part, even better than the car. Later that night at dinner, everything was perfect. Janet looked more beautiful than ever. The car was great. The food was great. I should have expected a few dark clouds. "Dave, I think you're ready to stand on your own 2 feet again," she said just after dinner. "At least all the damage my sister did to you has been repaired." "Janet, what are you talking about?" I asked. "Nothing. I just think you're ready to go back to your own home and get on with your life," she said. "People are starting to talk about us, but actually Mabel will be in court next week as a witness in Jeff's divorce," she said. "This will give you two a chance to talk about your own." "What are you talking about?" I asked. Is this related to last night? Don't worry about it, she said. I could tell she was trying to be emotionless. You were just too good in bed, and I started acting stupid. You know, you and I are just two healthy people getting their needs met. It's always been about making sure you're strong enough to make a choice. You're in better shape now and you look a lot better. But you're still the same wonderful person my sister married. I'm sure I saw a tear roll down her cheek. Go to court and see her, she said. Then think about what you really want. If you decide you want her back, you can do it. But make sure she's the one who changes. There's nothing wrong with you. That night, we still slept together, but all we did was sleep. The next morning, Janet left for Chicago to spend time with her parents. I hate my parents. Over the last week, we've been turning the media room into a bedroom. Looks like we'll have a special guest who needs his own room. I'm sleeping on the living room floor like a puppy, and their special guest will have the room. I've even stopped trying to move to the couch in the middle of the night. If my dad catches me on the couch during his nightly trips to the bathroom, he gets mad. I gave up the idea of starting my own business and decided to choose the second option, find another man. I've only been on 3 dates in the last 7 weeks. None of them were promising except one. The first 2 guys were terrible. Guy number 1 was a stockbroker, and he was rich enough to take me to a very exclusive French restaurant. We sat in a booth in the far corner. I asked for a table closer to the entrance or in the center, but he pointed to the dark corners in the back. It's more romantic there, he said. Dinner was great, and then he took me to his home. As soon as we entered, he went to his room for the night. He took out a bottle of wine and then told me to take off my clothes. What? I asked. Take off your clothes, he said. I don't do anything sexual until at least the 3rd or 4th date, I said in shock. He seemed so sophisticated. Listen, Mei Sue, he said. Mabel, I corrected him. Whatever, he said. I called you tonight because the woman I'm really interested in is busy. The only future for us is a friends with benefits relationship. I'm not interested in being your friend without benefits. So if you want to wait until your 3rd or 4th date, you're crazy. There won't even be a 2nd date. Now take off your clothes. Take me home now, I said. You're a big girl, he said. Get out. He then held the door open for me. Can you at least call me a taxi? I asked. Okay, he said. You're a taxi. Honestly, I meant another C word. But if you want to be a taxi. Next thing I know, he closed the door and I had no idea where I was. Fortunately, I knew my parents' address. I started walking toward the main road. I saw some shops and restaurants there that I could call from. Unfortunately, before I got there, it started to rain lightly at first, but by the time I reached the main road, it was pouring. I walked into a store looking like a drowned rat to call a taxi. My second date was more memorable. I met a guy on the internet. It was one of those find-your-partner.com sites. He was exactly what I was looking for. A rich, distinguished gentleman who loved the finer things in life and was generous. Exactly what I hoped Dave would become. At 7:30 p.m., the limousine stopped in front of my parents' house. I got in and saw the oldest man I had ever seen. He was older than my grandparents when they died and had an oxygen tank in the limousine. The first thing he said between ragged breaths was that I looked older than I said and a bit overweight. Before we left the block, he tried to squeeze one of my breasts with his bony hand. She's kind of soft, he said with a frown. Then his eyes rolled back and alarms began to sound. The driver stopped the car, got in the back seat, and started injecting him and beating on his chest. While working on the old man, he looked at me and told me to get out. We were about 5 miles from my parents' house. As I started walking, I saw a store where I could call my dad. I headed toward it, but 2 guys jumped out of an alley and dragged me in. One grabbed my bag and started going through it. "All you have is $3, he exclaimed. "Where's the rest?" "That's all I have. I'm going through a divorce." "Well, look at you," he exclaimed. "Okay, take off your clothes. We don't have all night." "There's no way I'm getting naked in an alley so you can have sex with me," I screamed. His partner came up and hit me hard in the face. As my head began to spin, he laughed and gently removed my skirt. Then he almost lovingly took off my top. I stood in the alley in just my bra and panties in front of 2 masked men. I couldn't believe how excited I was, but it had been a few months since I had sex. The 2 guys grabbed my clothes and started to leave. "Hey, aren't you going to do this?" I asked. "Hell no," said the first guy. Besides, said the second guy, your breasts look kind of soft. We can sell your clothes at that store down the street and get enough money for an easy girl. Then they left me standing there naked. What else could go wrong, I thought. Then I felt the familiar dampness in my hair as I heard a bird overhead. Damn, I thought, and I was right. My third date was the worst. Almost as soon as we got in his car, he started pestering me. He tried to touch my breasts and legs while driving. Where are we going? I asked. We're here, he said. But it's a parking lot, I said. You don't take someone to a parking lot on a date. This is not a date, he said. Hey, I said, confused. What do you mean this isn't a date? You've had a few bad dates, right? He asked. Yeah, I said. How many bad dates have you been on? More than a few, right? More than a few, I said, thinking about all the terrible dates before Dave and all the guys after him. Suddenly I realized what a fool I had been. Dave adored me like I was special. As I got older, Dave loved me more, even as my body changed. Every other man I went out with saw me as just another piece of meat. Well, he continued, when a girl goes on a bad date, she wastes time. When a guy goes on a bad date, he wastes both money and time. And it takes several dates to know if sex will happen. And even then, it takes 1 or 2 times to know if she's any good. Yes, that's true, I said. It's harder for men. That's why I started doing auditions before dating anyone, he said. This is your audition. Don't get me wrong, I like you, but I can't change the rules. What should I do at the audition? I asked. Tell you about myself and my preferences? No, save the romantic stuff for the date. Start by getting naked and lying in the back seat, he smiled. You expect me to have sex with you to get a date? I screamed. He simply nodded. You've got a long way to go home. You better get started, he said. I stuck one leg out of the car and looked up. Several angry pigeons were circling, and it looked like rain. Okay, I said. Whatever he did had to be better than being pissed on by birds and soaked in the rain. Less than 5 minutes later, we were having sex in the back seat. I looked up at the car's upholstery, thinking about how to get Dave back. Dating wasn't working. We had sex twice before he took me home. I realized Dave was special. He was the only man who knew how to make love. Every other man I slept with only cared about his own pleasure. They all used me. Dave really loved me, and I messed it up. As soon as we stopped at my parents' house, I got out of the car quickly. Thanks for listening, he said. But I'm not sure I want to date you. You're like a piece of wood in bed. I was ready to laugh until I noticed my mom, dad, and sister standing on the porch, mouths wide open in surprise. You're an easy girl, exclaimed Janet, then went inside. Mom and Dad followed, leaving me alone. Mabel, what the hell is wrong with you? Asked my dad. Why does Janet have her own room? I asked. Janet is not married, my dad answered sharply. She doesn't have a husband to go back to, and she's going through a tough time right now. Next week, if I don't play my cards right, I won't have a husband to go back to either. I cried. Janet and Mom entered the room. Mabel cheated on Dave, Janet said sharply. She got caught and the whole town knows, so we all came together to help. How was she caught? Asked my father. You know how they show people on the big screen in the driveway? Like when they catch someone eating or with mustard on their face? My father laughed at this. It's really funny, he said. Well, they caught your daughter with a guy squeezing her breasts while she was with him, Janet said. Almost everyone in town saw it. They got together and asked her to sign the papers the judge issued. What is OMD? Mom asked. An overnight scam, Janet said. In our state, a divorce takes a minimum of 60 days. In 10 days, Mabel and Dave will sign the final papers and divorce. They will have a meeting to decide if they want to change the terms of the divorce, which Mabel signed under duress. I think they would have tarred and feathered her if she hadn't signed. But once she signed that document, both she and Dave could do what they wanted with whomever they wanted. So she may not be approachable, but it's legit, and it will be even more so next week when she signs the final documents. I'm not signing a damn thing, I snapped. Over the last couple of months, I've realized what I had, and I want him back. I can wrap it around my little finger. When I leave for court tomorrow, I'm going to spend the whole week between Jeff's divorce and mine trying to get my husband back so this nightmare can end. Why are you here, Janet? And don't try to stop me from getting him back, I asked. I don't want him to make decisions about his life because of what I want, she said. Dave is like that. He is probably the nicest person I know. I want him to understand what he wants and what will make him happy. I don't want to see him do anything because he's trapped. 2 days later, I got off the bus and took a taxi to my home. Surprisingly, the locks on the doors weren't changed. My keys were even on the table in the hallway. This was a good sign. Dave didn't change the locks because he wanted me to be here. I went upstairs and took a good shower for the first time in a long time. I looked through my closet of nice clothes to choose an outfit. I picked a beautiful dress and an almost sheer bra and panties set. The panties must have shrunk during the wash. I had a hard time getting them on my butt. When I did, they became so tight that they left wrinkles on my legs, and the elastic at the waist broke. Of course, the bra still fit. I couldn't put on the dress either. I had to choose a different outfit. It was also a tight fit, but at least I got it on. I was supposed to appear in court at 10, and it was 9 in the morning, so I had to go. I sank into the plush seats of my car. Damn it, I missed it. I drove into the city and had just entered the city square when a white Mustang flew past me. It was a good car. Maybe I could get my husband to trade in his rusty old Mustang for one of these. The car parked a few places away from me. It was good to see new people moving into town. When the guy got out of the car, my jaw dropped. It was Dave. My husband, Dave. He had lost about 13 kilograms and cut his hair. He was more handsome than ever. He disappeared while I was staring at him. I couldn't wait for him to come home in the evening. Maybe I'll even visit him at work. I haven't been there in years, so it was time to visit. Suddenly, getting him back wasn't just something I had to do to survive, but something I actually wanted to do. I sat and watched from the back of the courtroom as a man's honor was destroyed. I could have been there if it weren't for my friends. I thought without the judge, the sheriff, and so many other people, especially Janet, I would be in the same condition as this poor guy. His wife was dominant and seemed to enjoy everything that happened to him. Was I better? Sure. In our marriage, I controlled the money, but I controlled Dave. So what's the difference? Although I wanted to see Jeffrey humiliated, it was too much. Mabel stepped up to the podium and told her side. This told me more about what was going on between her and Jeffrey, or at least as much as she was willing to admit in court. The case left poor Jeff with nothing but the clothes on his back, and my sympathy as his wife and her powerful team of lawyers left. She looked at me and nodded. "Looks like it's your turn now," she said. "Teach that bitch a lesson." I turned to leave, and as I was leaving the courtroom, Mabel ran up to me. "Dave, honey, I'm so sorry about all this," she said. "I think my hormones were out of whack. I don't know what made me do that. I think something was wrong, Mabel. You look different," I said, and then started to walk away. "Wait, Dave, are you going home? Do you want to talk? Maybe we could have dinner together," she asked. "I don't think so, Mabel," I said. "See you in court." I smiled and whistled as I walked away from her. I finally knew what I wanted and what I should do. 8 days later, Janet returned home. Millie was the first person she met when she pulled into the store parking lot. "Hi, Millie," she said. "Sorry about that thing a few weeks ago." "Don't worry about it," Millie said. "We were both chasing the same guy. It happens." "Have you heard the news about your sister?" asked Millie. Janet shook her head. She and her husband decided to sell that huge house and move away. They drove around in that fancy car for a week, giving orders and buying things. They can't wait to get out of here. "I guess it shows they can make some money," said Millie. "After everything he's been through, the divorce and all, you'd think he'd have a bit more backbone, but once you get it, you always get it, I guess." Janet's heart sank. She had hoped Dave would be stronger, but she had to move on with her life. She had no choice. She drove up to her house and saw a white Mustang in the driveway. Dave was always generous. Maybe he left the car as a token of their time together. If only he knew how much that time meant to her. When she accidentally revealed her true feelings, she knew she had to leave him. The next morning, while talking about time, she found another reason to let him go. She tried to open the door and had trouble. Suddenly, the door opened, and she found herself in a tight embrace. "Welcome home," Dave said. "What are you doing here?" she asked sharply. "Shouldn't you be with my idiot sister?" "Why should I be with her, Janet? I love you," he said. "We're divorced." I gave her the house and some money and told her to sell the house and get more money and leave. If she doesn't sell the house within 6 months, she'll only get $50,000 and we'll tear it down to build a sports complex for kids from both towns. Where will you live? She asked. With you, he said. I hope so, but I can sleep in the guest room if you want. Oh no, buddy, we've already talked about this, she said, throwing her arms around him. Then she pulled him towards the porch swing. Dave, the guest room will be gone soon, she smiled. Have you finally decided to enter the 21st century and turn it into a media room like your parents? He asked. No, honey, she said. It will eventually become a bedroom, but it will be something else for a couple of years. So, I'll end up getting my own room, he said. Oh God, you fool, she exclaimed. You got me pregnant. It's going to be a nursery for a while, and then we'll turn it into a bedroom for our baby. Also, I love you too. Well, I'm glad I didn't give all our money to your sister, he said. Why? She smiled. We'll be fine. Yes, but next time you get pregnant, we'll have to add another room to the house, he said. Who's Mabel's new man? Janet asked. Jeffrey, Dave chuckled. I met with them the day Mabel and I signed our final divorce papers. I offered them $1 million and a house to split. Since Janet was only going to receive a few $1,000s and Jeffrey was essentially homeless and without money, they agreed. But I added a few conditions. Janet smiled, kissing him and holding him close. Well, even though they hate each other now, they only get paid as long as they stay together. If either of them leaves or cheats, they lose all rights. The funny thing is, Mabel has gained at least 22 kilos and Jeffrey is no longer interested in her, if he ever was. He blames her for ruining his marriage and career, and she sees how spineless and pathetic he is, and blames him for our marriage failing. So she hates him with a passion. However, there are only 2 things they hate more than each other. What 2 things? Janet asked. Work and being broke, Dave said, grinning. They'll kill each other, Janet said, stretching her long legs over his and placing his hands on her barely rounded belly. Don't get too cozy just yet, I told her. We still have things to do. Such as? She asked. Well, I said, when this all started, I was a happily married man. Now I'm happy again, but not married. Janet looked at me with tears in her eyes. You mean, she said, you want that Yes, I said. I need Millie's phone number. Janet threw me onto the floor of the porch and looked at me with an evil glint in her eyes. I felt the area near my thigh. Oh, damn, Janet, you broke it, I said. Sorry, honey, she said. Is it a leg or a hip? I'm not that old, I snapped. You broke the box with your wedding ring. She rolled me over and started searching my pocket until she found the box. She noticed something else but found the box and put it aside as she took off my pants right there on her porch. Would you like to look at the ring first? I asked. Don't get me wrong, she said. The ring is important, but it's not like I'm going to say no. I've wanted this most of my life, but as important as the ring is, that's more important. She then picked up the box and ring and headed to her car. Janet, where are you going? I asked, puzzled. I have to show my ring to Millie and those bitches in town so they'll leave you alone, she grinned. Janet and I got married, had 4 children, and lived happily ever after. Less than a year after our wedding, about 3 months after the birth of our eldest daughter, Mabel showed up in town. She and Jeff went through all the money and broke up. Jeffrey ended up in jail for bad checks. He and his cellmate Bubba are said to be quite happy together. Mabel needed a job. We had a problem because she didn't have many skills, but family helps family. Since she was Janet's sister, we hired her as a delivery driver for minimum wage. She lives in a small apartment we built above the garage. Sometimes we pay her more to watch the kids while Janet and I go out and have fun. We decided that her child development degree should be put to use. Sometimes Janet and I catch her looking at us longingly and we just smile and wave. I know some people think she got off too easily after everything she put me through. And you may be right. But on the other hand, they say the best revenge is a life well lived. I am extremely happy. I love Janet and our children and my life much more than I ever loved Mabel. Janet is thrilled she finally got me, and Mabel must look at us every day and think about what she lost and what could have been. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like.